Hello everybody, welcome back to another installment of the Ultimate Lore Through. I know the first two episodes were a bit of a slog, but I promise this one is where the first couple juicy bits lie. But before I go ahead and get too high on all the excitement, this is a YouTube video, so it may be a good idea to appease our ethereal overlords with a like, possibly a subscription. Or hey, even a snarky comment about nothing that no one will ever pay attention to. Those are my absolute favorite. Now in today's episode, we're going to be doing a bunch of running through the Burwitch village, the outlying areas, a whole bunch of cellars and caves underneath the village, and sooner still than all of that, we're going to take a stroll through the East Marsh. The East Marsh is a dangerous domain located to the east of Mudrow, stuffed to the brim with cool shit for us to swoon over. Not only are we going to need to come back here to finish off the Hidden Path quest, but we also have to take out a big boy monster hiding in the Bone Pit, or as it's more commonly referred to, a male-dominated dance club. There's also a devotion shrine for us to check off our list in the same area, as well as a lot of monster shrine opportunities and some big unique bosses to tango with. Trust me, this is a really awesome location to be so early on in the game. As a quick recap though, let's talk about all the stuff that happened from the last two episodes, just to make sure everybody's caught up. So we started out with a whole encampment to impress by killing an army-raising reanimator, and even though we didn't manage to take his skull, Devil's Crossing welcomed us with open arms. Mostly. There's a couple people that still give us the shifty eyes, but Barnabas has the delightful job of telling us that the water pump is broken, but even after fixing it, the slith water will, in no uncertain terms, melt a person's insides. It honestly sounds like a super fun way to die. So we're turned into a volunteer exterminator who cleans out the watering hole for a bunch of yokels. Real hero stuff. After that, though, the captain has some actual work for us, and Sybil Hart wants us to look for the shambling corpse that used to be her brother. So we've got to start making the exploration runs into the wilderness to see what's happening in Burwitch. Problem with that is that we start running into these angry looking guys with red hoods and an obsession with blood that is most definitely unhealthy. These cultists are at odds with the ethereal takeover, but it's not like they're doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. The cult is hacking people up to summon monsters from the void and are soon to start positioning their aggression in Devil's Crossing. While investigating, though, we run into some rovers who tell us about a wandering nature god that saved them from an ancient and horrific curse, as well as the ethereals piercing the veil into reality and triggering the grim dawn. After saving Luther Graves and his busted leg, we take the scenic route to the outskirts of Burwitch, and by scenic I obviously mean the flooded cave full of angry rock monsters. While exploring the cave, we unseal an ancient temple full of skeletons and tortured souls that just can't die. Things in this part of the cave are ominous and disturbing with the context that comes with them, but really don't dive much past the surface. Before we finally lay a couple mutated innkeepers to rest, we meet our friendly new blacksmith and his stubborn, dusty teacher. I made the choice to have Duncan join me in Devil's Crossing, but Angren can also come along if you prefer older, mustachioed gentlemen. Little do the blacksmiths know, however, that there is a cult festering not too far from them in a dark basement locked behind a strange key. Wasting no time, though, we quickly dispatch the conniving cultists and give their leader a disappointed huff for not dropping his fucking sword. Oh well, win some, lose some. But now we're all caught up. Before we make our way into the swampy assness of the marsh, though, we've got a traitor to weed out in our midst. In the last episode, I mentioned that there are multiple ways to get a hold of the Strange Key quest, but there's a couple locations you can have it randomly drop, or you can find this special lectern in Burwitch Village. These orders are for a Mr. deranged, or however the hell the man's parents decided to pronounce this assortment of letters. You see, old Dini here is a cantankerous lot who doesn't like to talk much despite the obviously hospitable conditions of the people that he's bunking with. Seemed fishy to me from the start, so we're gonna slap him with this very clear evidence, listen to some excuses about how he's not that bad a guy, Spoiler alert, he's the fucking worst. And then inevitably vomit a mountain of acid on the man for trying to destroy humanity's last hope of survival. This guy busted the water pump, hides from all the bad guy fighting, and goes on secret missions for cultists. Peer pressure is a bitch, but still, this man is all about self-service and watching the world burn, so I think it's just fine for him to eat a shield or two in the face. Anyway, the Dini rant aside, the interloper has been dealt with, and now we can set out on our butthole-sniffing adventure in the deepest, dankest marsh this side of Gloomwald. Did I mention there's also some skeletons hiding out here? What about the trolls with the recipe for the Mistborn talisman? There is quite a bit to look out for in this area, as long as you're not dead set on only blasting through the place ass first. Really just stop and smell the swamp gas? Or keep your ears open for the beautiful sounds of bullfrog mating. You know what, really just witness with your own eyes the majesty of this, this soggy forest getaway. You know, just set up an Airbnb. I'm sure there is some overpaid tech startup CEO monkey just waiting to hoof it in the wilderness, right? Well, more to the point, the place looks dangerous, which it should. It's a dangerous domain. It's covered in overgrowth, the wildlife will kill you, the trolls want to squish you, and even after all that, a big angry monster called the Bone Hunter wants to hunt your bones. And not in a fun way. But hey, dangerous side, let's kick things off with a segue from the last episode. Hiding on the north side of the marsh here is a bunch of chthonic cultists. Turns out when everybody died from the apocalypse, these chode lords decided to take over the now empty cathedral and start passing out chthon wafers while they hang people from the ceiling and bleed them dry. The path up to the cathedral is demon-riddled, cultist-covered, and just asking to be slapped by the thickest hand of justice in your arsenal. So the cathedral itself is actually a really cool environmental piece that adds another level of intrigue to the cult of Chthon. Once you get inside the area, it's full of cultists and demons of all different varieties also, so if you're getting bored of the regular generic old cultist, get ready for a couple demons too. At the center of everything though, the boss of the church is Fatherabbadot, the betrayer of Menhir. So this character is big and bad enough to not only shout fiery brimstone sermons at you, but can back that up with actually dropping fire and brimstone all down on your head. He shoots chaos, he makes summons, he rains doom bolts down on your unsuspecting head, and it's actually rough enough that I have to play a little keep away with him just to make sure I don't get gripped by my gallbladder and yanked inside out. Shield resets and eyeball grenades, all that stuff. Really, really good for spacing him away and dodging all that shotgun chaos damage, but he puts those little pools of chaos underneath us, and it's actually horrifying how close to death you can come if you get hit with a random doom bolt. But once we kill him though, we get a nice little lore note, and if we're lucky enough to pick up his monster infrequent Avidovs Sermons, this is actually an item with some extra lore to it. But let's go hit this lore note nice and heavy.
For too long I have slaved before gods that hold no sway over mortal affairs. Too long have I given sermons to the sheep, all too eager for words of comfort in their sinful lives. My eyes have been opened to the greater universe, to the mercy of Chthon. For it is through his blood and sacrifice that we live and our lands thrive. Humanity makes a mockery of Chthon's gifts. We are unworthy of this land, unworthy of his blood, and so his blood must be returned. I've taken it upon myself to guide this flock to their true salvation. Slowly at first, for as sheep are spooked by the sudden arrival of the wolf, so too these fools will be unwilling to accept the real truth, even if it stared them in the eye. In time, their false idols will be struck down, and they will be made to repent for their ignorance. Each will be given a new purpose, whether by their own blood or by gathering it from others in our Master's name. But it matters not, for in the end of all things, we must all return to Cthon.
And if you manage to find his offhand, his book, Avidovs Sermons, you get this little snippet as well, just underneath the title. It was not immediately clear when Avidov's teachings shifted from the merciful words of men here to the vile darkness of the void, or how many he turned to the cult. So, you get this idea that the cultists are all very susceptible people, very easily swayed by maybe some gray manner of thinking, and then they're suddenly overwhelmed by this new life they're living after Armageddon. I mean, it's really crazy just how the cult leaders in the game really mirror cult leaders in life too. They get underneath your skin, trick you into thinking you're doing something much better than you are, and then suddenly you're killing people and draining all their blood to give it back to some dismembered space god that has just had a really bad time, really bad go with it. Now, just because the cultists have a presence in the Marsh, don't go thinking that this is all that's here. In fact, you're probably going to find yourself coming back to this exact place in the Marsh if you're just starting out in Grim Dawn. Velgor the Swamp King is a massive, angry troll who, unlike the ones you'll find in your favorite Reddit threads, actually has enough meat on his bones to squish you in the blink of an eye. Now you might be asking yourself, why is this guy important? Well, you see, dear viewer, this specific troll is one of two that can drop the Mistborn Talisman recipe for you. You have an actual 18% chance at the time of this video to get it. So if you're anything like me, you'll think, hey, that's only a couple times I need to do this, maybe 5 at most, and I can farm that easy. My sweet summer child. I remember the days when I was so young and naive as well. You might get lucky though, and grab this recipe without much fuss. If you don't though, you're going to want to set up a tent here in the Marsh, and another one in Smuggler's Pass further down in the game. This recipe was an actual nightmare to get, and after you get it, you're going to need more monster infrequents called troll bone crushers to actually make them. Bone crushers obviously come from trolls, but stock up. You'll be making a lot of Mistborn talismans. All that said though, Velgor isn't a walk in the park either. He's got abilities that can reduce the percentage of your health, he can stun your ass with multiple abilities, and he even has a couple ranged attacks when he isn't feeling particularly frisky. So be on your toes with that big guy, and any other behemoth trolls as well, unless you need some syrup and butter to go along with that newly flattened physique of yours. Now don't forget, even though you've killed a bunch of big angry monsters, trolls, cultists, all that stuff, this is in fact a dangerous domain. So it is going to be chock full of even more stuff to plunder, to explore, and all that. And monster shrines are going to be a big piece of that. So there's been at least 2 in this video so far, and that may end up going up to 3, I think. But each of those, very, very, very helpful, especially for farming XP, but in Ultimate, they're extremely good at finding purples for you. And just as I say that, we've got a purple lore note laying in the muddy water, so let's dive in.
Blasted bridge south out of town seems to have collapsed. Figured I'd try my luck through the marshes. Damn, was that a poor decision. Now the wagon's stuck in this fetid bog, and I'm stuck right here with it. Half a ton of gold and gems in the back, enough for a king's ransom. I still can't believe my fortunes. The owner of the jewelry shop just left it and abandoned it. Somehow nobody else got the idea before me to break in there. Of course, that all might be for nothing now, as it's just sinking into the mud. If it sinks any further, the horse will end up pulled in with it. I have to do something fast. I need to find some help. Surely others have fled in the direction. I was going, a few gems should smooth over the conversation. I can't see the light of a campfire not too far off. Couldn't make out a word they were saying. Sounded like a foreign language, but I'm sure we can come to an agreement. Who doesn't understand the common language of gold and gemstone? Gonna go see who they are and if they can help me get unstuck. I can smell cooking pork too. Maybe they wouldn't mind sharing it.
And if that weren't just a nice enough lore note for everybody to listen to, that man actually just walked over to a camp of trolls and probably got beaten to death and cooked. Like the pork that he was smelling. So, crime doesn't pay. Even in the apocalypse, there's some karma waiting just to squish you down and eat you for being a thievery, a bandit, you know, just unseemly folk. The mission continues, though, and we've got to get as far east of this easterly marsh as possible. Waiting at the end of all things is a monstrous beast full of spiky bits whose tooth is going to be important kind of later on, but important still. I don't know about you, but if my options are fight huge monster or backtrack, I'm obviously going to fight a million huge monsters. That's the only option. Only forward, no back. So Callus Ka, the Bone Hunter, is a huge, sinewy, skeletal wolf that literally sleeps on a pile of bones. The dance club was absolutely poppin' before this guy showed up, but after everyone saw his dance moves, they realized no one would ever be that good and went home to hang up their dancing chops forever. Now the lone dancer sits in his bone pit defending his title until a new challenger finally comes along. Well, I'm here, and it's time to tango. Alright, so please ignore my Grim Dawn fanfic so we can actually talk about this monster. Even though it was a quick fight, Callus Ka, according to sources that we will meet later in the game, is the progeny of the legendary Veronica. Veronica is a name that actually shows up on a lot of gear. So weapons, belt, there's a sword, there's a couple amulets, and even a component, which is pretty cool. Even cooler than that, though, is that the whole line of gear is about taking elemental and physical damage and then funneling it entirely into raw physical damage. I wish there was more to this lore, but right now I'm just ready to go make a Veronica build and be fueled by the might of the legendary bestial presence. The Allfather of the beasts, it would seem. Now, while I was gushing about a couple of beastie bad guys, you may have noticed that we picked up another lore note, and that we passed along a devotion shrine in the bone pit. So, we're going to talk about those, and we're going to talk about the implications of this lore note and the skeletons all around it.
Something powerful is coming from beyond. I've sensed its approach for some time now, but like a dream or some distant memory, the details were lost to me until now. I can feel it clawing its way through the veil somewhere to the east of Burwitch, no doubt drawn here by the maelstrom of otherworldly corruption. I dare say its nature eludes even me, but it is neither flesh nor spirit. I must discover what it is we are facing, and should the need arise, seal it away again behind the barrier between the worlds. The Order need not concern itself with these matters quite yet. I must do this alone.
Before we dive into that lore note, actually, we have a slight detour with Harvey the Drifter, a homeless guy who is apparently hanging out after the apocalypse in a shack all by his lonesome. And it turns out he's very good at scavenging and avoiding bad guys and being crazy. And it also turns out that if you ever try to annoy this man or take him back to Devil's Crossing with you, he will instantly attack you and kill himself, because punching me is a bad idea. So, you know what? I didn't kill him. He killed himself. It was his own doing. Obviously, I mean, you can't be taking pot shots at people like that in front of your weird doll child. So, yeah, so detour complete. let's talk about that journal, right? So, actually, one thing to note about Harvey, when you do talk to him, he does tell you about this secret little passage underneath the bridge, leading over to an island full of dead bodies. It's Graveyard Island off the side of Burwitch. But this island, after you get through the passage here, is full of big chests. It's got a couple special enemies on it, and it has, I should think it would have at least one monster shrine. It might have multiple, but I'm pretty sure it's at least one. But apart from that, really cool place. It is definitely worth checking out, and it is going to have another one of our devotion shrines on it, so you'll see that coming up. But yeah, do it. Check it off your list. It's important. Don't skip it. Now anyway, back to our lore note. Oroborook's Journal, Part 1. You might have noticed that this journal was surrounded by an altar, which was surrounded by a whole bunch of skeletons and undead people. That is... Well, that has its own implications because the Necromancer Oroborook is a kind of... they're not really a deity, but they're like this mythic, legendary champion in the Grim Dawn universe, and you eventually meet them way later down in the game in the Forgotten Gods expansion, but you read a lot about them, and they play an actually huge part in Act 2 with the Arkovian undead. So that is some cool stuff that's going to happen later on in the game. But as far as right now goes, Oroborook is actually chasing something, or tailing, or investigating, or, you know, just looking into stuff out here in the marsh. So the note, the page, the journal page is pretty ominous, but we don't really have a good idea of what he's after. There is a page 2 to this journal, but it does require that you go down a specific quest line, and that may have some implications for the Forgotten Gods part of the game. But it's safe to say that this is meant to lead us down a path, and it does have a conclusion. We just don't know when exactly that's supposed to take place yet. So after a few detours and distractions, I can say that we completed the majority of the East Marsh. Yes, you heard right, we're not actually done with it. The problem is, though, that we have to come back after Act 3, once we've made it all the way down the Hidden Path side quest. So the East Marsh will be important again once we've completed that, but until that time, we can't check it completely off the list. But anyways, let's talk about some other sneaky areas you might have missed if you weren't looking, including the Festering Lair. The Festering Lair is a little pit on the south side of the abandoned waterfront in Burwitch. This place is a single cavernous room with a boss named Grundleblith the Hoarder. This guy has a brother in the Old Dump named Pusquill the Hoarder, and we can just tell their mother must be so proud. Unlike the Old Dump, though, the Festering Lair has one of these cool hoard piles that has a chance to spit out some pretty dank items. Probably as dank in smell as they are in use. But it's a short trek off the beaten path. I would definitely call it worth your time because the boss isn't particularly difficult, and the hoard definitely has more to offer than it has by not picking it up. Once you're done with that, though, you can head back up to the abandoned waterfront and pick up a couple things of fabric for Constance in Devil's Crossing. One of the side quests that you have once you start getting some reputation with the town is to make things much nicer and more livable. Maybe much nicer is a little bit of overdoing it, but at least you'll put some fabric-y roofs on the place to keep rain out, and it'll look a little bit more colorful. You know, sometimes a little bit of decoration will just really bring a broken post-apocalyptic prison together, you know? In addition to the fabric, though, there is also a lore note, the second Harbor Master's Log, which is also called the Harbor Master's Log. So let's go find this dusty little lectern upstairs here and get to reading.
Another boat filled with hooded prisoners, dozens of them. As usual, a wagon was waiting for them, but from what I hear, it doesn't even take them far. When the loading boys came back from Burwitch after visiting that new doctor, and he said the wagon stopped outside the warden's mansion. The lad asked about the prisoners, and one of the handlers said rehabilitation. Not sure what to make of that. There's been over a dozen of these prisoners, transports in as many weeks. I just don't see how they can fit them all in that mansion. I don't care how big that place may be. Greg won't be keeping a present's worth of no-good thieves under his roof. Something peculiar is going on there, and it don't settle right in my stomach. Might have to send word up the lake to Malmouth. Get one of them inquisitors down here to look into this curiosity. Can't say I want one of them inquisitors poking around here. That makes a man uneasy.
And don't forget yet another devotion shrine right after that for us. But the Harbor Master really has a way with words, doesn't he? And by that I mean he really knows how to seem suspicious and grumpy in everything that he writes. If I'm being honest though, I'd probably be thinking the same thing. You know, like, how does he stuff that mansion with so many people? Followed shortly by, I should call the cops. But the cops make me so uncomfortable. Let's not forget about Constance, though, the lady that we grabbed all that fabric for, who's now making roofs and cloth for everybody to sleep under. That's probably pretty cool, not getting rained on, if it rains in your sleep. But Constance is, you know, she's grumpy when you meet her at first. She doesn't really want you around, doesn't want the children talking to you. But you find out that's because she lost her own children in the Grim Dawn for kind of less than cool reasons. She was having a dalliance or two of her own, and that's when the Grim Dawn happened. So instead of running out to save her children, she hid in the basement of the place she was at and didn't come out till everything was over. And that is really horrific. Just the worst. But Grim Dawn, ultimately, with a lot of our main characters, a lot of the townsfolk and people like that, is kind of this redemption story. So we get to see a lot of people trying to do their best in the face of really terrible odds, you know? You're either going to become a meat puppet, you're going to get juiced down into blood, you could get enslaved by a pack of bandits or just outright killed and stolen from, or maybe you'll get eaten by some ravenous beasts. I mean, there are a million ways to die in Grim Dawn, but some of these characters are out here still trying to live better lives, to be better people, and that is the kind of post-apocalyptic story that we all really need. After doing that, though, we did pick up Darlet here in the basement. She was hiding in a big salt ring, and that body that we just looted was also hiding in a big salt ring, which is kind of cool, because you see this a lot in the game, but it might not make sense to a lot of people, or it might not even register. But the salt ring is there to help keep the ethereals out of your brain, keep them out of your body. So their spirit form can't cross the salt, because this is like a real life thing. Like, salt circles exist. They're kind of big in ritual magic, I believe, but whatever the case may be, they're all over the place in this game. You'll see them quite a bit. So if you pick up on that, you can kind of put that together with themes as like an aha moment. I'm protecting myself from ethereals. This is how we do it. This is what we've been driven to. And that's really cool. I think that is actually just a really cool touch. But this video is getting pretty close to wrapping up. We're still taking out some monsters in some basements in Burwitch here. There is, you know, not a whole lot to do. There's nothing particularly unique about the basements other than the XP, a couple easy chests, maybe some breakaway walls hiding some stuff, but no more lore notes, no more crazy stuff for us to worry too hard about. In the next episode, though, we will definitely be diving into the Warden's mansion, as well as his cellar. Oh, wait. Was that a treasure trove? Did I actually just completely underplay some of the necessity of the basements in Burwitch? Oops! Well, you need dynamite to open those anyway, so if you don't have any, you're out of luck. Anyway, next episode, we'll be going into the Warden's cellar, into the underground transit, finishing Act 1, and showing down with the big bad Warden Krieg. The man is a sadist, a scientist, and is communing with the ethereal presence. It's actually kind of disturbing the way that the lore works between him and his ethereal counterpart inside his mind, but that's more for next time, so stay tuned. We'll be back next week with the ultimate lore through in the show off with Warden Krieg. Peace out, everybody. Thanks so much for hanging out.